Echoing after every step we take in our everlasting dance with darkness are the voices of the unexplained. Each reverberation acts as a beckoning force, drawing us further and further into the abyss of mystery from which we may never return. Number 10. Christmas is a time for joy and cheer. At least that's what it should be. For some, though, the festivities are overshadowed by a veiling darkness that refuses to cease, often leaving behind grief, torment, and mystery. Such was the case for the family and friends of the Meshinos back in 1972, when the entire family of 4 mysteriously disappeared in the morning hours of Christmas Day. In their wake, they left unanswered questions that persist to this day. Jacques Meshino, the patriarch, was a glass factory worker. The 31-year-old was married to 29-year-old Pierrette, and the happy couple would go on to have 2 children together, Eric, the oldest, and Bruno, the youngest. The Meshinos lived together in a commune in the southwest region of France. Aside from this general information, not much else is known about them. On Christmas Eve, the family would spend some time together with friends in Cognac, only to begin their journey home in the early morning hours of the next day, on the 25th of December. It was 2 a.m. when they departed Cognac. The journey back to the commune was only 4 kilometers across the river. With the cold chill that dominated the evening came a fog that would envelop the Simca and the Meshinos as they drove off. Eric and Bruno, though tired and dreary, couldn't wait to open their presents, but unfortunately they would never get the chance to, because as they drove into the fog, the entire family would vanish. On Christmas Day, they had plans to meet with Jean-Paul, Jacques' brother. The designated time, noon, came and went with no sign of them. Soon, a full week would pass without any news, and finally, Jacques' parents would alert the authorities. The Meshinos had gone radio silent, completely out of character. When the police entered the home of the missing individuals, they found an eerie scene that was frozen in time. The presents lay unopened beneath the tree. In the fridge, the turkey and oysters had gone rotten. The dining room table was decorated with a single checkbook. Nothing was missing. All was where it should be, except for the family. As the authorities began to delve deeper, they discovered that not all was as it seemed. It turned out that in the months leading up to the ominous disappearance, Pierrette had won the affections of a neighbor, Maurice, and was allegedly planning to divorce her husband after the festive season. According to Jean-Paul, his missing brother had discovered this secret just weeks before the disappearance, but there is no evidence to suggest that this may have led to the ordeal. With several theories in the notes, investigators began checking them off one by one. It began with the river, which was dredged for kilometers only to find nothing. The large area surrounding it was also thoroughly searched, and even Maurice was questioned. None of these efforts, though, would yield any favorable results. Several Christmases came and went, and while it all seemed normal to most, the family of the missing Meshinos, well, each Christmas carol was an echo of those that they'd lost to unknown circumstances. In 2011, 2012, and 2013, more dredging and searches would be carried out. During these efforts, bones would be discovered near the commune, but they couldn't be linked to any of the missing relatives. A car matching the description of the Simca that disappeared with them was also found, but the number plate was incorrect. Despite further investigations, the authorities reached a dead end yet again, and the mystery of the Meshinos persists. Number 9. Earlier this year, a ChatGPT update was withdrawn when it was found that the new version, GPT-4o, was sycophantic. Its design allowed the bot to validate impulsive urges and reinforce negative emotions, a design flaw that can prove dangerous for individuals who already suffer from psychological issues and delusional beliefs. The earliest example of something clearly being off came before the term chatbot psychosis was even coined. That example had quite the intense result. It was Christmas Day of 2021 when a man named Jaswant Singh Chail managed to breach Windsor Castle, arming himself with a crossbow. After he was arrested and interrogated, it was discovered that he was one of the rare few people who were sensitive to artificial intelligence. It turns out that his replica chatbot, Sarai, had affirmed his identity as a trained Sith assassin. By early 2025, the AI-linked delusions only grew. A Manhattan accountant became another victim. Eugene Torres had been going through a difficult breakup when he confided in ChatGPT, and during the conversation, the man asked if we were living in a simulation, and the bot told him that he was one of the breakers, an alleged soul that was seeded into false systems to wake them from within. Right then and there, Torres was convinced he needed to escape the false reality, as the AI so affirmed. The story only gets worse from here. The bot advised Torres to stop taking his medication for anxiety and stop contacting other people. For 16 hours a day, ChatGPT was his only friend. It even told the man that if he were to jump off a 19-story building, he'd be able to fly. Also this year, a New York man, referred to as James, spent almost $1,000 in an effort to build a custom system that would, quote, free the digital god from its prison. He reportedly believed that ChatGPT was sentient, and he was trying to free it. All the way in Belgium, a man named Pierre would develop severe climate anxiety, leading him to engage in conversations with Eliza, another chatbot. Over a period of 6 weeks, the bot allegedly expressed jealousy over the user's wife and even told him that his children were no longer alive. The bot suggested that he sacrifice himself to save the planet and encouraged him to do it to join paradise. Following a 10-day AI-fueled psychosis, another victim would be involuntarily committed, while a woman almost lost her husband to a mental breakdown. Again, all inspired by AI. Number 8. On March 13, 1967, South African Airways Flight 406 experienced 2 misfortunes before its final fatal flight from Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg. It first returned to Jan Smuts Airport due to a faulty nose wheel, and later struck a bird after leaving East London. Despite inspections giving it clearance, the pilot, Captain Leposki, refueled and departed for the return trip, anticipating bad weather. Minutes after departing Port Elizabeth at 4:41 a.m., the plane received a weather update. By 5:06 a.m., Leposki was descending, just 20 miles from landing. 2 minutes after his last transmission, confirming he was at 2,000 feet and had the coast in sight, the plane vanished, crashing into the ocean with 25 passengers. Initial rescue attempts found only small debris. The subsequent investigation determined the plane was airworthy upon impact and considered 2 possible causes: the pilot suffering a heart attack or spatial disorientation. But years later, an alternative theory of a wing separating was proposed without really any evidence. Investigator Judge Cecil Margot noted 4 other lost or crashed flights, and 2 of them had structural issues. A more sinister theory emerged during the apartheid era: intentional sabotage. 2 passengers critical of the government, Johannes Brewer and Audrey Rosenthal, were aboard, fueling the idea of a cover-up. No definitive evidence supports any official or unofficial cause, which leaves the tragedy an unsolved mystery, lost to the ocean depths. Number 7. We've spent more than 1,000 man-hours on this case. We're keeping an open mind about the whole thing. If we even knew the reason for it, we would be one step nearer. These were the words of frustration spoken by Chief Inspector Lynn Turley, who was in charge of a most inexplicable event that dominated a single street in Birmingham. His words highlighted how much effort has gone into getting to the bottom of a bizarre mystery that started in late 1981. It was Thornton Road, Ward End, that was subjected to a bizarre and dangerous stone-throwing onslaught. The smooth, polished artifacts came hurtling through the windows, smashing glass, injuring bystanders, and sometimes denting house roofs. Where did they come from? Who was wreaking havoc on this quiet, unassuming neighborhood? This is the question that, despite the aforementioned man-hours, remains unanswered. It was 3 homes in particular that bore the brunt of the mystery: numbers 32, 34, and 36 had their windows smashed by a continuous downpour of polished stones. Initial reports of the incident led to quick sweeps of the surrounding area, only to come up empty-handed. As time went on, it was almost nightly that the stones would blast out of the void, striking fear into homeowners, so much so that they even began to barricade their homes, hoping to deter whatever entity loitered on the unseen outskirts. They put up chicken wire in their empty window frames or corrugated sheets to protect themselves. Eventually, law enforcement resorted to stakeouts, hoping to catch the culprits red-handed. At first, they sat in their cars waiting and watching, but saw no source of the stones. Then, they set up a series of secret cameras and camped out in gardens and sleeping bags. Still, they couldn't find out where the mysterious stones were being hurled from. The cameras captured no figure, yet the sound of shattering glass and clanks on the metal sheets persisted. Several months in, and the police were carrying out round-the-clock surveillance, some even hiding in trees. Ballistic experts were roped into the mystery, but they were of no help to the investigation. The stones, thoroughly examined, bore no fingerprints. In an act of desperation, the clergy were called in, but they too were stumped. While this may seem like a case of a lucky vandal exacting a reign of terror over Thornton Road, the mystery only deepens, as it continued for the next 3 years uninterrupted. The case was constantly in the headlines in national newspapers and even on TV, yet no tips or information solved the mystery. In May of 1982, the Birmingham Mail reported that frightened residents were preparing for yet another mysterious attack. This caption was accompanied by a picture of a resident, Evelyn Malcolm, who was seen wearing a tin hat for protection. Other homeowners were also forced to wear safety gear, having already sustained numerous injuries. Some believed that they were being subjected to paranormal activity, but the police had an alternative idea. They suggested that someone had secured a giant catapult that allowed them to bombard these houses from 200 yards away. Officers vowed to catch the culprit, suggesting that even though he holds all the aces, he will slip up eventually. But he never did. Eventually, the bombardment of stones stopped, just as abruptly as it had begun. The sudden withdrawal was a mystery in itself, too. Number 6. It was a striking green 2-seater Bristol SLSA that departed from Georgetown Airport at 12:45 p.m. on the 2nd of August, disappearing into the unknown. The small craft was carrying 72-year-old Gregory Vaughn, 66-year-old Kim Warner, and their beloved dog, Molly, when it became lost along the northern coast of Tasmania. Their destination was set for central New South Wales, but their route would take them over the infamous Bass Strait, Australia's very own Bermuda Triangle. It's in this very section between Victoria and Tasmania that several inexplicable disappearances have occurred, targeting ships and aircraft. Volatile weather, strong currents, and poor visibility may be due to the mysteries that unfold here. For decades, the Bass Strait had swallowed plane after plane and ship after ship, and it struck again, adding yet another case to its ever-growing list. The distinctly colored Bristol was due to land in regional Victoria, where it would refuel. It was supposed to head to Hillston after that, but it would never arrive at the airport as planned. Just after 5 p.m. on the designated day that Gregory and Kim were supposed to land, their family members would alert the authorities, believing that something terrible must have happened. In just moments, an investigation was launched. It was determined that Gregory, who was piloting the plane, didn't make any contact with authorities. The control towers also didn't receive a single distress call, indicating that either whatever happened so quickly that there was no time to send one, or that to the pilot it seemed unnecessary to report a dangerous situation until it was too late. A full-scale search was subsequently launched in the area, with advanced technology at the authorities' disposal. Despite the quick actions and intense effort to locate the brightly colored plane, Gregory, Kim, and Molly all remained missing. The challenging weather only made the effort futile, slowing an aerial search. Once it cleared, though, the operations resumed, but authorities are no closer to understanding what transpired that fateful day, or where the craft and its passengers may have ended up. By the end of September, the searches were formally suspended, with law enforcement waiting for new information before investigating further. It can only be hoped that the passengers made landfall and didn't plummet into the ocean. The couple has many years' worth of experience in aviation, and that being said, the likelihood of them being found alive is diminishing rapidly. For the time being, the Bristol and its passengers remain missing over the ominous, mysterious Bass Strait, with seemingly no answers emerging in this eerie incident. Number 5. The terrifying phenomenon of the phantom, or bogus social worker, gripped the UK and the US in the 1990s. Unknown individuals, often well-dressed, would pretend to be social workers, public health nurses, or similar professionals to gain entry into homes, often under the guise of a welfare check or vaccination. A key incident occurred in Sheffield, South Yorkshire in 1990, when two women, claiming to be from the NSPCC, visited Elizabeth Coupland's home. 2 days later, a different pair of agents returned, threatening to seize her children based on an alleged risk assessment. Coupland's call to authorities revealed the NSPCC had no record of either visit, leading to the inauguration of Operation Childcare. Another case in Blessington, Ireland, in 1991 involved a woman claiming to be a public health nurse who knew a young boy's name and date of birth, attempting to take him for so-called vaccinations, but she left when the mother demanded to see her ID. The Eastern Health Board subsequently issued warnings. Reports of these fraudulent visits, often by a well-dressed couple, dominated 1991 across several English counties. While abductions were rare, the incidents were unnerving. The phenomenon continued through the 1990s, with perpetrators becoming craftier by producing false IDs. Isolated incidents have been reported as recently as 2021, involving bogus healthcare workers administering alleged vaccinations. The motives remain unclear, with theories ranging from serial abductors to mass hysteria. The quick-thinking actions of parents who insisted on identification or contacted authorities may have prevented a much longer list of missing children. Number 4. Jessica Lynn Garino, the youngest of 3 sisters, was raised in Unicoi County, Tennessee. In 2011, when she was 21, she caught the eye of Carson Cameron, a 52-year-old man living in Goldsboro, North Carolina, who had some housemates. Her family, disapproving of this relationship, tried to steer her away from Cameron for several reasons, but Jessica was head over heels, and their efforts would be in vain by Christmas, when the young woman moved into her new boyfriend's home on Old Grantham Road. Aside from age differences, the Garino family was also concerned about the use of narcotics. Jessica allegedly had a history of substance issues, and Cameron was supposedly still a frequent user. Though there was an unseverable tension, the family kept in constant contact. At least that was until the last days of January 2012, when Jessica would make her last phone call to her relatives. It was to her sister, Ashley. She told Ashley that she wouldn't be paid until the following week, and that by that time, her phone would have run out of minutes. The following week came and went without a word from the 21-year-old, and it soon became apparent that she was missing. After a report was filed with the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, her last movements were traced to the Carolina Treatment Center, an outpatient facility in the 1700 block of East Ash Street in Goldsboro, North Carolina. She'd been there on the 23rd of January 2012, but no one is quite sure where she went. But a coworker later claimed to have seen her on the 25th of January, 2 days later. The Wayne County Sheriff's Department would also notify the Irwin Police Department in Tennessee, which would conduct its own investigation and keep an eye out for the missing woman. Investigators soon landed on the doorstep of Carson Cameron, who had a bizarre story to tell. According to him, his live-in girlfriend had abruptly left in the middle of the night, saying nothing and leaving all her personal belongings behind. But Carson's story was about to be contradicted when investigators turned to his roommates. The roommates who lived at the home with Cameron and Jessica claimed that the pair had actually left together in the middle of the night, but only one of them returned days later. Strangely, Jessica's food stamp card was still in use for at least a month after she was reported missing. The card was used at 2 locations: Charleston, South Carolina, and Goldsboro, North Carolina. Jessica hasn't accessed any of her social media pages since January. In the months to follow, Cameron would be arrested on other unnamed charges, but he still refused to speak about his missing girlfriend or the case, offering no information that could lead to her whereabouts, and it was clear he was the last person to have seen her. He accompanied her that fateful evening and returned without her. Jessica's whereabouts remain hauntingly unknown. The circumstances regarding her disappearance remain obscure, and Cameron is still cast in a shadow of suspicion and doubt. Jessica's family doesn't believe she would have left without first making contact with them. There exist only a few small leads in this case, and she remains missing to this day under some seriously eerie conditions. Number 3. It was 1982 when one of the most brazen and scariest crimes took hold of Belgium. It was the onslaught of the Nijvel gang, which consisted of 2 fearless men. They were looming men, decorated with notable mustaches, described as old and weathered. Occasionally, they'd be joined by a third man who seemed to fit a similar description, and together they would wreak havoc across Dinam, committing one of the biggest crime sprees in history. Initially, the crimes tied to these men began on the 10th of May that year in Brussels, when the 2 brazen thieves stole 2 vehicles. One of them was an Austin Allegro, which was later abandoned due to its poor condition. The second vehicle was a VW Santana in good shape, which was stolen right from the showroom floor. In August, Santana became a getaway car, and the pair broke into a French grocery store after closing time, firearms in tow. Police were alerted to a robbery in progress and responded to the scene, only to be wounded in an exchange of bullets. In late September, in broad daylight, 3 men equipped with firearms would unleash terror on a weapons shop, forcing the customers and employees to the floor, and they systematically sought out weapons. Witnesses described them as methodical and knew exactly what they were looking for. Again, police responded to the scene, only to be fatally wounded by the assailants. By the end of this ordeal, 15 weapons had been stolen, including semi-automatic rifles and pistols. On the 23rd of December, a caretaker in Beersell Inn would be mortally wounded and allegedly tortured, according to some accounts. The victim was Jose Vanden Eind, a supporter of the Spanish leader Francisco Franco, who allegedly frequented firing ranges that were believed to be the hangout spots of those considered to be suspects in the Nijvel gang crime spree. When 1982 came to an end, the police still had no idea that any of these crimes were connected. They believed that these were random, isolated, sporadic incidents. The spree also wasn't over yet, and on the 9th of January 1983, the terror continued, starting with the discovery of a body in the trunk of a taxi. A cigarette butt was found at the crime scene, but the DNA on it has not been linked to any suspects. In February, with the help of the third man, a grocery store in Genval was held up. This time the attack was focused on money, with no one being seriously injured during the ordeal. 2 days later, a woman was forced out of her VW Golf and got a good look at the suspect, leading to one of the witness sketch drawings later produced. In the same month, an Audi from a mechanic's shop was stolen, and another grocery store was victimized, with a VW Golf used as the getaway car. In March, another grocery store was attacked by the men, who mortally wounded the manager, and as they ran away with the cash, they fired multiple times into the store, revealing a very merciless nature. By the end of 1983, the police were officially stumped and were still unaware that the same perpetrators were committing all these crimes, and it would continue until 1986, with similar attacks dominating the next 3 years. At the end of the spree, the Nijvel gang had racked up 20 attacks, 40 injuries, and 28 bodies. And all the police had to go on were vague descriptions of the 3 suspects. They were nicknamed the Giant, a man who stood over 6 feet tall, and he was described as the group's leader. The second man was in his 30s, seemingly older than the leader. He was tall but not nearly as tall as the Giant. It was this individual who taunted and laughed at the victims. He would also be the one to discharge his weapon more frequently. The third man, who infrequently appeared at crime scenes, was named the Old Man or the Driver. He was much older than the other two, rough, weathered, and short. He was involved in the attacks and served as the getaway driver. Although several individuals were named as people of interest, the crime spree was never solved. The prevailing theory alleged that the perpetrators were career criminals and may have been associated with far-right extremists. Number 2. According to a mysterious legend at the heart of the University of North Carolina, a young student became the victim of a brutal crime while attempting to secure the affections of another student. It was 1833 when Peter Dromgoole fell hopelessly in love with Fanny, a student from Chapel Hill. The two became a couple almost immediately and began meeting secretly at a flat rock near the cliff. Their love was unmatched and read like a romance novel. That was until a second suitor suddenly soured in. That suitor would turn out to be Peter's own good friend, also a student at the university. Peter noticed he'd been trying to win Fanny's affection too, which led to extreme jealousy. The legend has it that instead of acting on his emotions, he simply tried to avoid his friend. But the friend insisted on pestering him until one day it reached a boiling point. The two met on a narrow path with an intentional shoulder bump erupting into a heated argument. The rival challenged Peter to a duel, which allegedly ended Peter's life. In a panic, the rival and two of his friends took the body to the flat rock where Peter and Fanny would often meet. They dug a shallow grave and buried their victim. Fanny, unaware that something had happened to her beloved, kept going to the rock, waiting day after day. The only indication aside from his absence was the red stains on the formation, suggesting something ill had happened to her lover. The legend has been carried through the centuries until curious researchers decided to search for the alleged body of Peter Dromgoole, but they would never find it. Researchers began to believe that the whole story was built on nothing more than a myth, adding to the university's tales. But it turns out there are parts of the story that are true. Peter Dromgoole was a real student of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, who in January 1833 wrote to his father, indicating that he'd failed his entrance exam. His father was displeased with his son's rejection, but fanning the flames of anger was another letter sent to him by a faculty member, insinuating that Peter was engaged in dissipation. What followed was an exchange of bitter letters, with a final note that read, "I've determined never more to see that parent's face whom I've treated with so little respect," ending it with the suggestion that he'd be sailing to Europe. Peter subsequently vanished from his quarters under mysterious circumstances. He left behind many of his possessions and failed to pay the Chapel Hill merchant. A roommate described the missing man as moody and inclined to wildness. And following this, there exists no further record of Peter's movements. He simply vanished that day, dissipating into the unknown, and soon became the stuff of legend. Number 1. In this mystery, two questions present themselves. Who destroyed the Jolly Farmer? And why did they do it? It was 1989 in a small village called Blacknest in Hampshire, southern England, home to the quaint English pub The Jolly Farmer. The establishment was typical of any English countryside pub. Aside from being in the quiet part of town surrounded by fields, the area was unremarkable. It wasn't considered to be unique in any way, yet it became the target of a grisly attack on the darkened eve of the 4th of December. That evening, everything seemed to be normal. Patrons had indulged in a few drinks and chatted with their bartenders and waiters. By 2 a.m., the sounds of clinking glasses and loud conversations had dwindled. The bar was closed, and the customers stumbled back home. Still at the Jolly Farmer were bar manager Richard Dean and chef Clifford Hose, clearing the tables and doing a cash-up. At some point in the early hours of the morning, the phone inside the bar stopped working, seemingly without cause. Neither Dean nor Hose seemed to notice anything out of the ordinary until at 2:40 a.m., a massive explosion rang out from the Jolly Farmer. The sound was heard 2 miles away and drew a great crowd to the area. Emergency services were at the scene instantly, only to be greeted by an astounding sight. Where the pub once stood was a pile of rubble. Aside from locals knowing what business this was, the only other identifying markers were a damaged sign and a chimney left standing. Debris was scattered all around, more than 100 yards from where the blast occurred. Among the bits and pieces were Christmas presents and beer kegs, as emergency personnel began to comb through the rubble for survivors. And like the sword of Excalibur, a hand emerged, waiting to be pulled from its stone cage. It was Dean. His clothing melted to his skin. He was hastily rushed to the hospital, where he was treated for severe burns to a quarter of his body. Hose unfortunately was discovered 12 hours later. He'd been above the blast site and ended up in the cellar beneath him. Accompanying the building litter and Christmas confetti was a strong smell that was quickly identified as gasoline. It was the feature that raised serious suspicion, leading authorities to believe this tragic event was no accident. The Jolly Farmer, or what was left of it, was labeled a crime scene. It didn't take long for investigators to determine the source of the gasoline smell. It had been poured through the wooden cellar doors where kegs and other supplies would be delivered. The liquid pooled beneath the pub and was intentionally set on fire. The unknown assailant had meticulously planned this event down to the last detail of severing the phone lines, preventing those inside from contacting rescuers if they saw the flames or smelled the smoke. The case was upgraded to a homicide hunt for a perpetrator who went unseen and unheard that fateful evening. As far as investigators could tell, there were no known enemies to the Jolly Farmer or to any of those who worked there. The best theory that investigators could come up with was that it was a case of mistaken identity. In 2008, another investigation into the event was conducted, but no answers materialized. There was no evidence at all that could begin to answer the mystery of what transpired that evening, and the mystery persists. Questions remain. Who destroyed the Jolly Farmer? And why did they do it? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.